Logger builds house on wheels, and the reason no one believes. Harold Mitchell had been working in silence since the early hours of dawn, hammer in hand, while the entire small town of Crystal Springs buzzed about his latest obsession. For 3 months, the 52-year-old man had been working on a project no one could understand. It was when Mrs. Dorothy, his closest neighbor, decided to confront him directly about that strange construction growing day by day on the vacant lot next to his simple wooden house. "Harold, for heaven's sake, what is this thing you're making?" she asked, pointing at the wooden structure resting on 4 enormous truck tires. The logger stopped working and wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his calloused hand. His brown eyes avoided the woman's curious gaze. "It's just a project, Mrs. Dorothy. Nothing much." "Nothing much? Harold, you sold your furniture, sold your old pickup truck, and you're spending all your savings on this. This house on wheels," she insisted, gesturing with her small, wrinkled hands. "You don't need to worry about me." Dorothy shook her head, unconvinced. In 50 years living on that dirt road, she had never seen anything like it. The construction already had walls, windows, and even a small wooden porch. The most intriguing part were those gigantic tires supporting the whole structure, as if the house could start walking at any moment. "Listen here, young man. I knew you when you were a boy chasing your mother's chickens. I know when you're hiding something," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. Harold took a deep breath and went back to hammering a board onto the side wall of the structure. The noise echoed through the quiet morning, waking the birds singing in the nearby trees. "Why don't you ask your son what he thinks?" suggested Dorothy, trying a different approach. "My son has nothing to do with this." "Of course he does. Ever since Catherine left, you've been different, Harold. More closed off, more peculiar, and now all this madness." Upon hearing his ex-wife's name, the man stopped working completely. His large hands trembled slightly as he held the hammer. "Catherine has nothing to do with this either." "She doesn't? Then why are you building a house that can move? Where do you want to go, Harold?" The question hung in the morning air, like a thick fog. The logger looked at his creation with a mix of pride and sadness. That house on wheels represented much more than Mrs. Dorothy could imagine. "Sometimes you need to move to find what you've lost," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 2 days later, the neighbor's comment still echoed in Harold's head as he welded an iron bar that would serve as a support for the hydraulic leveling system. The skill with tools he had developed over 30 years of work as a logger helped him solve the complex engineering problems his mind created. The truth was that Harold Mitchell wasn't just an ordinary laborer. At 20, he had studied 2 years of civil engineering in the state capital before dropping everything to care for his sick father. He never regretted the decision, but he always carried with him the technical knowledge he acquired during those months away from home. "Dad, are you okay?" asked a female voice behind him. Harold turned and saw Jennifer, his 25-year-old daughter, walking carefully across the lot, trying not to trip over the tools scattered on the ground. "Jen, what a nice surprise. I thought you weren't coming back until the end of the month." "I changed my plans. I need to talk to you." The young teacher had brown hair tied in a ponytail and wore a simple blouse and jeans. Her green eyes, just like her mother's, observed the construction with a mix of admiration and worry. "It's about this here, right?" asked Harold, gesturing toward the house. "Daddy, everyone in town is talking. They say you spent all your savings on this. Is it true?" The man turned off the blowtorch and removed his welding mask. His grey beard had a few singed hairs from the work. "What I do with my money is nobody's business." "Of course it's my business. I'm your daughter, and I'm worried about you." Jennifer approached and touched one of the wooden walls. The construction was solid and well made, she had to admit. The joints were perfect, and the wood had been treated with care. "Daddy, why are you building a house on wheels? Where do you want to go?" The same question Mrs. Dorothy had asked. Harold sat on a log he used as an improvised bench and looked at his calloused hands. "Jen, have you ever felt like you lost something very important in your life?" "Of course I have. When Mom left, I felt like I lost half of myself. And if you could do something to try and get that lost thing back, would you do it? His daughter watched him carefully. There was something in her father's eyes she couldn't quite decipher. It was determination mixed with a deep sadness. It depends on what it was, Daddy. But if it was something impossible— Impossible is not trying, he interrupted, rising from the log. Jennifer sighed. She knew that characteristic stubbornness of her father's well. When Harold decided on something, it was hard to make him change his mind. She had inherited the same determination, for better or worse. Do you want to tell me what's really going on? Because I know it's not just a hobby, like you've been telling people. The lumberjack walked to one of the house's windows and ran his hand over the frame. He had installed double-pane glass for better insulation. Every detail had been carefully considered. Is your brother doing well? He asked, changing the subject. David is fine, yes. But don't change the subject, Daddy. He still doesn't want to talk to me? Jennifer lowered her eyes. The relationship between her father and her older brother had deteriorated over the last 2 years, especially after their mother left. He's still hurt. He needs time. How much time? It's been almost a year since we've had a proper conversation. Daddy, what happened wasn't only your fault. David was too proud as well. It was my fault, yes. I should have understood his situation better. I should have supported him when he needed it most. Harold remembered their last argument. David had lost his job at the sawmill and was drinking more than he should. Instead of offering help, Harold had been too harsh with words he could no longer take back. His oldest son left home that same night, and since then they only talked through Jennifer. Have you tried looking for him? I tried, but he doesn't want to see me, and now with this house business, he must think I've completely lost it. Jennifer laughed, despite the situation. Well, Daddy, admit it. It is a bit strange. A house on truck tires isn't exactly normal. Normal is overrated, Jen. That afternoon, Jennifer helped her father install the house's electrical system. She had studied some basic electrical concepts to help in the school labs where she worked, and her help was valuable. Daddy, this is getting really impressive, she commented, as she ran wires through the conduits he had prepared in the walls. It will have solar power, hot water, everything a normal house has. But Daddy, a normal house doesn't need to move. Harold stopped working and looked at his daughter. Sometimes you do need to. What do you mean by that? Jen, do you remember when you were little and we used to go camping at the lake? Of course, those were our family's best moments. Do you remember what I always said about nature? Jennifer thought for a moment, trying to recall childhood memories. You said that trees know when they need to move, that they spread their seeds on the wind to find good soil. Exactly. Sometimes to grow properly, we need to be in the right place. And you think you're not in the right place here in Crystal Springs? Harold didn't answer immediately. He looked through the window at the town where he had been born and raised his family. The small, simple houses, the dirt roads, the church in the center of the square. Everything had remained the same for decades. It's not about being in the right place. It's about being able to go where it's necessary. Necessary for what, Dad? To find what I lost. That night, after Jennifer had left, Harold sat on the small porch of the house on wheels and watched the stars. The structure was almost ready. Only a few finishing details and the installation of the hydraulic system that would allow leveling the house on sloped terrain were left. He picked up an old notebook where he noted his plans and calculations. The pages were full of technical drawings, precise measurements, and notes about materials. Any engineer would be impressed with the project's level of detail. On the last page of the notebook, there was a yellowed photo of his family. Him, Catherine, Jennifer, and David, during a barbecue in the backyard. Everyone smiling, hugging, happy. The photo had been taken 3 years earlier, but it seemed to belong to a completely different life. Catherine looked beautiful in that photo, with her wide smile and blonde hair held back with a blue clip. They had been married for 25 years when she decided she could no longer live in that small town. She wanted to see the world, experience new things, live adventures. Harold, I feel suffocated here, she had said in a conversation he'd rather forget. Every morning I wake up and see the same faces, the same houses, the same routine. I need more. More than a family that loves you? It's not about love. It's about truly living. He had tried to convince her to stay. He offered trips, changes to the house, even moving to a bigger city. But Catherine had already made her decision. She wanted a separation. "What if I could give you the adventure you want?" he had asked the day she packed her bags. "Harold, you're a good man, but you don't understand. It's not about having an adventure. It's about having the freedom to choose." Now, looking at the house on wheels, he wondered if he had finally understood what she meant. The next day, Harold woke to the sound of raised voices outside. He quickly put on his work clothes and went out to see what was happening. Mrs. Dorothy was arguing with three men he didn't immediately recognize. One of them held papers in his hands and was gesturing toward the house on wheels. "What's going on here?" asked Harold, approaching the group. "Harold, thank God you're here. These men say your construction is illegal and needs to be removed," explained Dorothy, clearly agitated. The man with the papers stepped forward. "Mr. Harold Mitchell? I'm Richard Thompson from the city's Works Department. We've received several complaints about an illegal construction on this lot." Harold looked at the papers the man held out. "Complaints from who?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't have a permit to build in this area. Furthermore, there's no construction category for, well, whatever that is. It's a house. Houses don't have wheels, Mr. Mitchell. Mine does." Richard Thompson sighed, clearly not expecting that kind of response. "Look, Mr. Mitchell, I understand you've invested time and money into this, but rules exist for a reason. You have 15 days to regularize the situation, or we'll have to take measures." "What kind of measures?" "Demolition." The word fell like a thunderbolt in the middle of the conversation. Mrs. Dorothy let out a startled exclamation. "You can't just demolish the man's work like that." "We can, and we will, if he doesn't meet the legal requirements," replied Richard, putting the papers back in his briefcase. After the men from City Hall had left, Harold stood still in front of his creation, processing the threat he had received. "Harold, what are you going to do?" asked Dorothy. "I'm going to finish the house. But they said they'll demolish it." "Then I'd better finish it quickly." That same day, Harold worked with an urgency that surprised even Mrs. Dorothy. He installed the last components of the plumbing system, tested the entire electrical system, and made the final adjustments to the structure. Around 5 in the afternoon, Jennifer came running. "Dad, I heard what happened. The whole town already knows about the city's threat." "So what?" "What do you mean, so what? They're going to demolish your house." Harold stopped tightening a bolt and looked at his daughter. "Only if they can find me." "What do you mean?" "Jen, do you know how to drive a truck?" "I do, but—" "Great, because I'm going to need your help early tomorrow." That night, Harold couldn't sleep. He walked through the small house where he had lived for almost 30 years, observing every room, every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, all that remained of a life that no longer existed. He took an old suitcase and began to sort out some clothes and personal items. Not many things. The house on wheels didn't have space for a lifetime of accumulated belongings. At 5 in the morning, a knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Jennifer, dressed in work clothes and with a determined expression. "Ready for the adventure, Dad?" "Are you sure about this, Jen? Once we leave here, I don't know when we'll be back." "Dad, I don't know what you're looking for, but I know you need to find it, and I want to help." Harold hugged his daughter tightly. It had been a long time since he'd felt so grateful to have someone who believed in him, even without fully understanding his reasons. "You'll drive the pickup truck in front. I'll go with the house. If anyone from the city shows up on the way, I'll find a way to delay them." "That's right." At 6 in the morning, a small procession crossed the still empty streets of Crystal Springs. Jennifer drove a borrowed pickup truck leading the way, while Harold carefully controlled the house on wheels through a steering system he had adapted. Mrs. Dorothy was at her window, waving a handkerchief. A few other people had come out to see the unusual spectacle, an entire house moving through the town's streets as if it were a common vehicle. "You did it, Harold," she murmured to herself. "You made your house walk." The first stop was at the gas station on the edge of town. Harold needed to fuel the system that moved the house and check if everything was working perfectly. Mr. George, the station owner, came out of the office with wide eyes. "Harold, what the hell is this?" "It's my new house, Mr. George." "Your house? Boy, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life." "Crazy but functional." George walked around the construction, observing every detail. The huge tires, the wooden structure, the well-installed windows, the small porch. "How did you manage to make this thing move?" "Hydraulic system adapted from farm tractors. The tires are from a mining truck. The steering is manual, but it works well." "And where are you going with this thing?" Harold looked at the road stretching beyond the town. There was no specific destination in mind, just the need for movement, for searching, for not staying still, waiting for life to happen. "I'm going to look for what I lost." "And what was it that you lost?" "I'm not entirely sure yet." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. The first week on the road was a constant learning experience. Harold discovered that driving a house was not as simple as he had imagined. The differently distributed weight required special attention on curves and hills. Jennifer followed him closely, using a two-way radio he had installed to keep in touch. They stopped in small towns in the countryside, causing a sensation wherever they arrived. "Daddy, where are we going to sleep tonight?" asked Jennifer over the radio as they passed through a town called Whitestone. "We'll look for a quiet spot outside of town." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we'll see." They found an open field next to a stream. Harold activated the hydraulic system to level the house on the slightly sloped ground. In a few minutes, the structure was perfectly stable. "Impressive," commented Jennifer, watching the process. "Come see the inside." The inside of the house was surprisingly comfortable. Harold had optimized every inch of space. There was a small kitchen with a gas stove, a table that transformed into a bed, a compact but functional bathroom, and even a small heater for cold days. "Daddy, this is incredible. It's like a trailer, but much nicer." "It's our mobile home." That night, sitting on the small porch, they watched the stars while listening to the sound of water running in the nearby stream. "Daddy, can I ask a question?" "Of course." "You really don't know what you're looking for?" Harold thought for a long moment before answering. "Jen, have you ever had the feeling that your life was going in the wrong direction?" "Sure. When I finished college, I spent 2 months not knowing what to do with my life." "It's similar but different. It's more like I lost the ability to stay still, as if staying in the same place was giving up." "Giving up on what?" "On believing that things can change, that I can change." Jennifer understood there was something deeper behind that journey. It wasn't just about building an unusual house. It was about rebuilding something inside her father himself. "And Mom? Does this have to do with her?" Harold sighed. "Your mother always wanted to travel, to see new places, and I always made excuses to stay home. Work, responsibilities, bills to pay. Now that she's gone, I understand that maybe I should have tried harder to understand what she needed." "Do you think you'll find her?" "I don't know, but I think I'll find something." On the third day of travel, they stopped in a town called St. Margaret, where a craft fair was happening. The house on wheels attracted a curious crowd within minutes. "Is it a real house?" asked a child, tugging on her mother's skirt. "Yes, it is, dear," replied Harold, smiling. "Would you like to see inside?" In a few hours, dozens of people had visited the house. Harold discovered he enjoyed showing his work and explaining how he had built every detail. "My brother works in construction," commented a young man. "He would never believe something like this." "Most people don't believe it," replied Harold, "until they see it with their own eyes." An elderly lady named Mrs. Eleanor approached and talked at length with him about the travels she had made in her youth. "Young man, if I were 40 years younger, I'd want a house like this for myself," she said, laughing. "Imagine the freedom that must be. You're never too old to start a new adventure." "Oh, but my bones wouldn't agree with you. That afternoon, while Jennifer was buying supplies in town, Harold received a phone call he wasn't expecting. "Hello? Harold? It's Catherine." His heart sped up instantly. They hadn't spoken in 3 months. "Catherine, how did you get my number?" Jennifer gave it to me. "Harold, I heard about your mobile home. Is it true?" "It's true." "Where are you?" "In St. Margaret, about 120 miles from home." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Harold, why did you build that thing?" "It's complicated to explain." "Try." He looked at the house, at the people still milling around it, at Jennifer returning loaded with shopping bags. "I remember you saying you felt suffocated in Crystal Springs, that you wanted the freedom to choose." "And so?" "I think I understood what you meant." "Harold." "No. Let me finish. I spent 50 years of my life in the same place, doing the same things, thinking the same way. And when you left, I realized that maybe the problem wasn't just the town. Maybe it was me." "You're not a problem, Harold." But I was limited. I was afraid of change, of risks, of leaving my comfort zone. And now you built a house on wheels. Now I built freedom. Jennifer approached and noticed her father was on the phone. She made a gesture, asking if it was something important. He nodded yes. "Harold, where are you going to stop with that house?" "I don't know. And maybe that's the most important part." "What do you mean?" "For the first time in my life, I don't have a fixed plan. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow or next week. And that scares me and excites me at the same time." Catherine laughed on the other end of the line. It was a nostalgic laugh mixed with surprise. "You really have changed." "I'm trying." "And Jennifer? Is she with you?" "She is. She's the one who helped me leave Crystal Springs." "And David?" The question caught him off guard. Since he'd left home, he had tried not to think too much about his older son. "David still doesn't want to talk to me." "Harold, maybe it's time you tried a different approach with him too." "What do you mean?" "Instead of waiting for him to come to you, maybe you should go to him." "He doesn't want to see me, Catherine." "But you've never really tried showing up at his doorstep, have you?" Harold realized she was right. All attempts at reconciliation had been through phone calls or messages via Jennifer. He had never made a real effort to meet his son in person. "Where is he living now?" "In Green Meadows. He got a job at a mechanic's shop there. Green Meadows was about 60 miles from there. With the house on wheels, it would be a full day's trip." "Catherine, do you think I should go there?" "I think you two need to talk. For real. Without pride, without hurt." "What if he doesn't want to see me?" "Then at least you tried." After hanging up the phone, Harold talked with Jennifer about the possibility of them going to visit David. "Dad, I think it's a good idea. David is hurting from this situation too." "Do you think he'll see me?" "I don't know. But I know he misses you, even if he won't admit it." "How do you know?" "Because he always asks about you when we talk. He asks how you are, if you're eating right, if you're in good health." Harold was surprised by the revelation. "He asks that?" "Always. And he gets sad when I say you're okay, but kind of lonely. Why did you never tell me this?" "Because you're both too stubborn, each waiting for the other to make the first move." That night, Harold made the decision. They would go to Green Meadows. For the first time since he began this journey, he had a specific destination in mind. The trip to Green Meadows took 2 days. The mobile home wasn't built for speed, and Harold preferred to go slow, enjoying the scenery and thinking about what he would say to his son when he found him. Green Meadows was a town a bit larger than Crystal Springs, with paved streets and more activity. They found the auto repair shop, where David worked late on a Thursday afternoon. "Dad, are you sure about this?" asked Jennifer, parking the pickup truck in front of the shop. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." The shop was a large shed with several bays, where mechanics worked on different vehicles. Harold asked to speak with David Mitchell and was directed to the back of the establishment. He found his son bent over the engine of an old truck. David had inherited his father's height, but was thinner and had dark hair like his mother. He wore a blue jumpsuit stained with grease. "David?" The young man turned and froze upon seeing his father. For a moment, neither said anything. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you." "How did you find me?" "Your mother told me where you were." David wiped his hands on a rag and looked around, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Dad, I'm working." "I know, but we need to talk." "About what?" "About us. About the fight. About the things I said that I shouldn't have said." David sighed and looked at the floor. "Dad, it's in the past. You don't need to—" "Yes, I do. I was wrong, David. Very wrong. And I want to apologize." "You came all the way here just for that?" "I came for that, and to show you something." "Show me what?" "My new home." David followed him to the front of the shop, where Jennifer waited beside the mobile home. When he saw the structure, the young man was dumbfounded. "What is that?" "My home. I built it over the last 3 months." David walked around the structure, observing every detail with the technical eye he had developed as a mechanic. "Dad, this is incredible. How did you manage to make it move?" Harold began to explain the hydraulic system, the tire adaptation, the weight and distribution calculations. David listened with growing attention. "You did all this by yourself?" "I had Jennifer's help with some parts." "And it really works?" "Of course it works. I came here from Crystal Springs with it." "My God, Dad, this is brilliant." The genuine admiration in his son's voice was like a balm to Harold's heart. It had been so long since he had seen pride in David's eyes. "Want to see inside?" The next 20 minutes were the best that father and son had spent together in 2 years. David asked dozens of technical questions, suggested improvements, praised creative solutions his father had found. "Dad, you were always smart, but this is on another level. I learned a lot by researching on the internet, and I remembered some things from when I studied engineering." "You studied engineering?" "For 2 years. I never told you that." "No, never. I dropped out to take care of your grandfather when he got sick, but I always liked solving technical problems." David sat on the small porch of the home and looked at his father with a new expression. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you build this? What's the point of a mobile home?" "The point is to not stay stuck when life gets stuck." "What do you mean?" Harold sat down next to his son on the porch. "David, do you remember our last fight?" The young man lowered his eyes. "I remember." "Do you remember the things I said?" "I remember everything, Dad, word for word." "I said you were weak, that you were using drinking as an excuse not to face your problems." "You did." "And do you know what I discovered building this home?" "What?" "That I was weak too. Only instead of drinking, I hid in routine, in complacency, in the idea that things are just the way they are, and that's it." David looked at his father with surprise. "Dad, let me finish. When you lost your job and started drinking, you were suffering. You were scared, confused, lost, and instead of helping you, I criticized you. Instead of supporting you, I judged you, because it was easier than admitting that I was lost too. You weren't lost. You always knew what you wanted." "No, David, I never knew. I only pretended I did. And when your mother left, I realized I had spent my whole life pretending to have control over things I couldn't control." Jennifer approached and sat on the grass in front of the two. "Dad, you can tell David about what we talked about yesterday," she suggested. "What talk?" asked David. "Your father told me he built this house because he finally understood the difference between movement and progress." David looked confused. "I don't get it." Harold took a deep breath. "David, I spent 50 years moving in circles. Every day the same routine, the same problems, the same solutions. I thought that was stability, but it was actually stagnation. And now I understand that sometimes we need to get out of our place to see things clearly. We need to change perspective, to find new answers to old problems." David was silent for a few minutes, processing his father's words. "Dad, are you trying to tell me something specific?" "I'm trying to apologize and to tell you I was wrong. You're not weak. You're a man who was going through a hard time and needed help, and I, who should have offered that help, did the opposite. Dad, I also said things. You said things because you were hurt, and you were hurt because I hurt you first. David got up from the porch and walked a few steps, clearly emotional. Dad, I really missed you. I missed you too. When Jennifer told me you were building a crazy house, I thought you'd finally lost it. And you thought right, said Harold, laughing. I did lose it. But sometimes losing it is what we need to see things in a new way. And now, what are you going to do with this house? I don't know. I'm learning to live without being sure of what comes next. And doesn't that scare you? It scares me like crazy, but it also gives me a feeling I haven't had in a long time. What feeling? Of being truly alive. That night, David asked for time off from the workshop, and the three had dinner together at a restaurant in town. It was the first family meal they'd had in almost 2 years. Jennifer told me you're traveling without a destination, commented David. That's more or less it. And where are you going now? Harold looked at his children. I don't know. Do you have any suggestions? Dad, can I suggest something? Said David. Of course. There's a town called Sun Valley, about 3 hours from here. They're having a festival for inventors and builders. You could take the house there. I'm sure people would love to see it. Inventors Festival. Yeah, people who make different creative things, just like you. Jennifer thought the idea was excellent. Daddy, it would be a chance to show your work to more people. I don't know if the house is good enough for that. Dad, interrupted David, you built a house that moves. If that's not a good enough invention, I don't know what is. The next day, David asked for a few days off and decided to go with them to Sun Valley. He said he wanted to see people's reaction to the house on wheels and help with any possible mechanical problems. Are you sure about this? Asked Harold. I am. It's been a while since I've had a real adventure. The trip to Sun Valley was completely different from the previous ones. With David along, the family dynamic changed. They talked over the radio, stopped for lunch together, laughed at silly things like before. Dad, can I ask a personal question? Said David over the radio. You can. Do you still love Mum? The question caught him off guard. Harold had avoided thinking about his feelings for Catherine since she left. I love her, but not in the same way as before. How so? Before, I loved the idea of having her always nearby, always available, always the same. Now I understand that loving someone is wanting them to be happy, even if it's far from us. And that doesn't hurt. It hurts a lot. But it's a different kind of pain. It's the pain of knowing you did what you could do. Do you think you'll get back together? Harold thought about the conversation he'd had with Catherine on the phone. There was something different in her voice, a curiosity about his transformation that he couldn't fully interpret. I don't know, David, and I've learned that it's okay not to know some things. Sun Valley was a charming town nestled among green hills. The festival took place in the main square and the adjacent streets. When they arrived, dozens of inventions were already on display. Homemade electric cars, robots made from recycled materials, adapted farming machinery. The house on wheels caused an immediate sensation. Within minutes, a crowd had formed around it. Is it a real house? Everyone asked. Does it really work? They wanted to know. How did you get this idea? Harold found himself repeating the same explanation dozens of times. David and Jennifer helped, showing technical details and telling about the trip they had made. Your father is a genius, a lady said to Jennifer. I've never seen anything like it. I know, replied the daughter proudly. At the end of the first day of the festival, a journalist from the local television station approached for an interview. Mr. Harold, how did the idea to build a house on wheels come about? It was kind of necessity, he replied, still uncomfortable with all the attention. Necessity how? Sometimes you need to move to find the answers you're looking for. And what answers were you looking for? Harold looked at his children, who were watching him intently. I was looking for a way to reconcile with myself. How so? I had lost my family. My wife left. My son wouldn't speak to me anymore. And instead of trying to understand why that had happened, I stood still, waiting for things to resolve themselves. And did they? No, not until I understood that I had to be the one to do something different. And building a mobile home was that different thing. Building the house was just the beginning. The most important thing was having the courage to leave the place. The interview aired on the local news that night and spread on social media. Suddenly, the story of the lumberjack who built a house on wheels to reconcile with his family began to circulate across the country. "Dad, you've become famous," said Jennifer, showing the messages coming in on her phone. "Famous how?" "Lots of people are sharing your story, saying they were inspired by your courage." "What courage?" "The courage to change when everything seemed lost." The next morning, Harold woke up to a call from Catherine. "Harold, I saw your interview on television." "Catherine, how did you manage to see it?" "It's playing on several channels." "You didn't know?" "No idea." "Harold, can I tell you something?" "Of course. I was very proud of you." "Proud? You've transformed into a person I didn't know. Courageous, determined, capable of recognizing mistakes and fighting to fix them. I just did what needed to be done." "No, Harold. You did what I never thought you were capable of doing." "What do you mean?" "You left your comfort zone. You took a risk. You changed." There was a long pause in the conversation. "Catherine, where are you now?" "In Charlotte. I got a job at a tourism company." "And are you happy?" "I'm different. I've learned a lot about myself these months." "What kind of things?" "I learned that freedom isn't just being able to leave. It's also the power to come back when we want to." "And do you want to come back?" "I want to see you. I want to see your house on wheels. I want to talk with you about everything that's changed." Harold's heart raced. "Where do you want to meet?" "Wherever you are. Aren't you the one with the mobile home?" They arranged to meet in a town called Sweetwater, which was halfway between Sun Valley and Charlotte. It would be a meeting the following Saturday. "Dad, how are you feeling?" asked David as they prepared the house for the trip. "Nervous, anxious, afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of discovering that we've changed so much we don't recognize each other anymore." "And what if that's the case? Then at least we'll know the truth." The trip to Sweetwater was the longest they had taken, not just in mileage but in expectation. Harold alternated between hope and apprehension the entire way. "Dad, can I give an opinion?" said Jennifer over the radio. "Go ahead." "You don't need to be afraid of Mom. You've both changed, but the love you had for each other hasn't changed." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I see the way you talk about her, and I know the way she talks about you when we speak." "How does she talk about me?" "Like someone who still loves very much, but who needed time to understand things." They arrived in Sweetwater on a Thursday afternoon and parked the house at a campground by a lake. The place was perfect, quiet, beautiful, with enough space for important conversations. Catherine arrived on Saturday morning. Harold saw her from a distance, getting out of a rental car and walking toward the house on wheels. She looked different, more tanned, hair a little shorter, clothes he didn't recognize. "Harold." "Catherine." They greeted each other with a cautious hug, like friends who hadn't seen each other in a long time. "So this is your famous house," she said, observing the structure. "This is it. It's prettier than I imagined. Want to see inside?" The next few minutes were quiet as Catherine explored every room of the house. Harold watched her reactions, trying to decipher what she was thinking. "It's incredible," she said finally. "It's functional, beautiful, smart. It's everything you are, but never let show before. I didn't know I was capable of doing something like this. I always knew." "How so?" "Harold, you were always smart and creative, but you were also always too afraid to try new things. And now you've built a house that moves and traveled the whole country with it. I'd say the fear is gone." They sat on the house's porch, facing the lake. Jennifer and David had gone for a walk around town, leaving the parents alone. "Catherine, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you regret having left?" She thought for a long moment. "I don't regret leaving. But I regret the way I left. How so? I should have talked more with you. I should have better explained what I was feeling. I should have given us more chances to try to work it out together. And why didn't you? Because I was convinced you would never change, that you would always be the same secure, predictable, inflexible man. And you were right. No, Harold, I was wrong. You changed. And you changed in a way I never thought possible. I changed because I lost you. Sometimes we can only change when we have no other choice. And how do you feel now? Different. Lighter. Like I took a weight off my back that I didn't even know I was carrying. What weight? The weight of trying to control everything, of wanting things to always be the same, always predictable. Catherine laughed. You built a house on wheels, Harold. Nothing could be less predictable than that. That's true, and I'm enjoying the unpredictability. They talked for hours. About the months of separation, about the things they had learned, about the fears and discoveries they had made about themselves. Harold, can I tell you what impressed me most in your television interview? You can. When you said you were looking for a way to make peace with yourself, that really touched me. Why? Because that's exactly what I needed to do too. Make peace with myself. And did you manage? I'm managing, just like you. As the sun began to set over the lake, Catherine asked the question they had both been avoiding. Harold, what happens now? With us, I mean. I don't know. For the first time in my life, I really don't know what's going to happen, and strangely, that doesn't terrify me. Me neither. What do you mean? Harold, I've learned that I don't need to have all the answers right now. I can figure things out as they happen. And what do you want to happen? I want us to get to know each other again. These new people we've become. How? What if I traveled with you for a while? Nothing definitive, nothing promised, just seeing how it goes. Harold felt his heart speed up. You'd be willing to live in a house on wheels? I'd be willing to try. And your job in Charlotte? They gave me an extended leave. It could turn into unpaid leave if I need it. Are you sure about this, Catherine? I'm sure I want to try. We'll figure out the rest along the way. That night, Catherine slept at an inn near the campground. They weren't ready yet to share the same space, but the proximity was already an important step. The next morning, Jennifer and David returned from town excited. Dad, we talked and decided something, said Jennifer. What is it? I'm going back to Crystal Springs. I need to resume my classes and my life there. And I'm going back to my job in Green Meadows, David added. But first I want to help make some improvements to the house. What kind of improvements? Better communication system, GPS. Some adaptations to make it more comfortable for two people. Harold looked at Catherine. 2 people? If she really wants to travel with you, said David, smiling. The next 3 days were intense. David worked on the technical improvements to the house. Jennifer helped reorganize the interior space, and Catherine began to familiarize herself with the concept of mobile living. It's simpler than I thought, she commented, after spending a whole afternoon organizing her belongings into a compact suitcase. Simple how? You discover you don't need as many things as you imagined. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned, said Harold. We accumulate objects thinking they'll make us happy, but they really just weigh us down. And now? What makes us happy? Experiences, conversations, new landscapes, challenges we didn't know we could overcome. On Sunday afternoon, it was time to say goodbye. Jennifer and David would return to their lives, and Harold and Catherine would begin a new adventure together. Dad, are you sure you want to do this? Asked Jennifer. Why do you ask? Because it's a big risk. You've both changed a lot. It could go wrong. It could. But it could also go right. And even if it goes wrong, at least we'll know we tried. And if it goes right, we'll have built something new on the ruins of something old. David hugged his father tightly. Dad, thank you. For what? For teaching me it's never too late to start over. Thank you for forgiving me. There was nothing to forgive, only things to understand. After the children left, Harold and Catherine were alone for the first time in months. The feeling was strange. Intimate but cautious, familiar but new. "Where do we go now?" asked Catherine. "I don't know. Do you have a preference?" "I do. I want to go to the most beautiful place you can imagine. And if I can't imagine one, then we'll search until we find it." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The first week of traveling together was a delicate process of rediscovery. They slept in separate beds that David had installed, talked about everything except the future of their relationship, and explored places neither of them knew. "Harold, can I ask you a question that might be strange?" said Catherine one morning, as they had coffee on the porch of the house, parked on a hill overlooking a green valley. "Go ahead." "Do you feel like you're living someone else's life?" "Why do you ask that?" "Because I do. As if the Catherine who was married to you for 25 years is a different person from the one here now." Harold thought about the question while observing the landscape. "I feel like I'm living the life I always wanted to live but never had the courage to." "And who is this brave person you've become?" "I'm still figuring that out, but I know it's someone who isn't afraid of not knowing what comes next." "And do you like that person?" "I do, and you? And do you like the person you've become?" "I do too, but sometimes I'm afraid she might be incompatible with a normal life." "What is a normal life?" "A fixed home, routine, responsibilities, long-term plans." "And do you think that's important?" "I think it can be important for some people, but maybe not for me, at least not now." That afternoon, they visited a small town where a harvest festival was happening. The house on wheels again drew curious onlookers, and they found themselves telling their story to dozens of people. "Are you married?" asked a child. Harold and Catherine looked at each other. It was the first time anyone had asked that question since they started traveling together again. "We are travel companions," replied Catherine. "And do you like each other?" "We like each other very much," said Harold. "Then why don't you get married?" The innocence of the question made them laugh. "Sometimes adult things are more complicated," explained Catherine. "But they don't have to be," murmured Harold, too low for the child to hear but loud enough for Catherine. That night, for the first time since they started traveling together again, they had a serious conversation about their relationship. "Harold, where do you think this is going?" "Honestly, I have no idea." "And that doesn't bother you?" 6 months ago, it would have bothered me a lot. Today, it doesn't. Why the change? Because I learned that some things don't need a defined ending to be worthwhile. What do you mean? Catherine, these last few days with you have been some of the best of my life. Not because we have a guaranteed future, but because we're truly living in the present. And what if this is all there is, if it can't be more than this? Then we will have had this, which is already much more than I expected to have when you left. And what if it can be more? Then we'll discover what that more is. You've changed a lot, Harold. We've both changed. Do you think we've changed for the better? I think we've changed to be more true to ourselves. 1 month after their reunion, they were on a beach on the northeastern coast when they received a call that would change everything again. "Hello? Dad, it's Jennifer. You need to come home." "What happened?" asked Harold, immediately concerned. "Nothing serious, but there's a situation you need to resolve." "What situation?" "The City Council of Crystal Springs wants to make a deal with you." "What kind of deal?" "They want you to build more houses on wheels, to use in emergency situations." "How so?" "Last week there was a flood in the region. Several families were left homeless. The mayor remembered your house and thought it would be a perfect solution to shelter people temporarily." Harold looked at Catherine, who was following the conversation. "And what do you think about that?" "I think it could be an amazing opportunity, Dad. You could turn your invention into something that truly helps people, but that would mean stopping traveling. Not necessarily. You could have a base in Crystal Springs and keep traveling whenever you wanted." After hanging up the phone, Harold talked at length with Catherine about the proposal. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's exactly the kind of thing the person you've become would do." "How so?" "Harold, you built this house to solve a personal problem, Now you have the chance to use your creation to solve other people's problems. But what about our trip? Our experience? Our experience doesn't have to end. It can just evolve. Into what? Into something bigger, something that includes other people, besides just the two of us. The idea kept hammering in Harold's head in the following days. Creating wheeled houses to help people in emergency situations made sense, but it also meant taking on responsibilities he had learned to avoid. "Catherine, can I confess something to you?" "Of course." "I'm afraid of going back to Crystal Springs and becoming the same person I was before. And I'm afraid of you not going back and missing the chance to do something truly important." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you, and I know you wouldn't be able to be happy knowing you could have helped people and chose not to." "And you? What would you do in Crystal Springs?" "Honestly, I don't know, but I want to find out." The decision to return was made on a Sunday morning after a 3-hour conversation on the beach. They would return to Crystal Springs, but with conditions. "We're not simply going back to the life we had before," Harold established. "How so?" "We're going to create a new life there, a life that includes the freedom we discovered here." "And how are we going to do that?" "First, we're going to build the emergency houses. Second, we're going to keep traveling whenever possible. Third, we're going to get married again." "What?" said Catherine, surprised. "You heard right. I want to marry you again. But the person you are now, not the one you were before." "And are you sure about that?" "I'm sure I want to try to build something new with you, and I see no difference between that and building a wheeled house." "What difference?" "Neither one is guaranteed to work, but both are worth trying." The trip back to Crystal Springs took 2 weeks. They stopped in several towns along the way, visited friends they had made during previous trips, and enjoyed the last moments of total freedom before taking on new responsibilities. "Harold, I'm not nervous," said Catherine when they spotted the town sign. "No, I'm excited. I think we're going to do amazing things there." "Even if it's difficult?" "Especially if it's difficult." The arrival in Crystal Springs was a surprise. Half the town was gathered in the main square to welcome them. There were banners, applause, speeches from the mayor. "Harold Mitchell, you are a pride to our town," shouted someone in the crowd. "When are you going to start building the emergency houses?" asked another. "Where's Mrs. Catherine? Did you come back together?" Questions came from all sides. Harold felt a little overwhelmed by all the attention, but also touched by the community's affection. "Folks," he said, climbing onto a small makeshift platform, "first I want to thank you for this welcome. I wasn't expecting any of this." The crowd applauded. "Second, I want to say yes, I am willing to help with the emergency houses, but I'm going to need your help." "What do you need?" shouted Mr. George from the gas station. "I need hands to work, minds to think of solutions, and hearts to understand that we're doing this to help people, not to make money." "You can count on us," the crowd shouted almost in unison. "And third," continued Harold, looking at Catherine, "I want to announce that I'm getting married again, to the same woman, but in a completely different way." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Catherine stepped onto the platform and kissed Harold, while the entire town cheered. "And when will the wedding be?" shouted Mrs. Dorothy. "When we finish the first emergency house," replied Catherine. "It will be our way of celebrating." The following months were the most intense of Harold's life. With the help of volunteers from the town, he set up a workshop in the shed that belonged to the old sawmill and began working on the first emergency house. The design was an adapted version of his original home, smaller, more functional, made with cheaper materials, but keeping the essence of mobility and self-sufficiency. The idea is that each house can shelter a family of up to 5 people for an indefinite period, explained Harold in a meeting with the mayor and civil defense representatives. "And how much does each one cost?" With the materials donated by the community and the volunteer work, it comes to around $10,000 each. "It's feasible. How many can you build per month?" "With the team we have now, 1 per month, but if we get more volunteers, it could be more." "And who will operate these houses in an emergency?" "We're training a team of local volunteers. The idea is that each house has 2 operators who know how to transport and set it up quickly." The first real test happened 3 months later, when a storm tore the roofs off several houses in the rural area. The emergency house was transported and set up in less than 2 hours, sheltering a family of 4 who had lost everything. "It works," said the civil defense coordinator, observing the family already settled and comfortable in the mobile home. "It works very well." The story of the project spread quickly. Soon other towns began seeking out Harold to implement the system in their regions. "Dad, you've become a national reference," said Jennifer, showing a newspaper article about the project. "Not national, just a person who found a way to help." "And how are you feeling with all this?" "Fulfilled. For the first time in my life, I feel I'm doing exactly what I was born to do." "And Mom? How is she handling this new life?" "Your mother is loving it. She discovered she has a talent for organizing volunteers and managing social projects." Indeed, Catherine had become the administrative coordinator of the project. Her experience in the tourism company proved valuable for organizing the complex logistics of building and operating the mobile homes. "Harold, can I tell you something?" she said one evening, as they rested on the porch of the original house. "Of course. I have never been so happy in my life. Even with all this rush, all this responsibility? Because of all this responsibility, I feel like I'm doing something that really matters. And don't you miss the total freedom we had when we were just traveling?" "No, because I've discovered that freedom isn't about having no responsibilities. It's about being able to choose the responsibilities that make sense to you. And these make sense to you. Completely. And for you. For me too." The wedding took place on a Saturday morning in the town square, right after the inauguration of the 5th emergency house. It was a simple but moving ceremony. "Harold Mitchell," said Catherine, holding his hands in front of the whole community, "when I married you 26 years ago, I thought I was choosing security and predictability." "And you were," he replied, smiling. "Today, I'm choosing adventure and uncertainty, and I've discovered you are capable of offering both." "And you, Catherine Marie," said Harold, "are teaching me that it's possible to have roots and wings at the same time, that it's possible to be stable and adventurous, responsible and free. How are we going to be now? We're going to be what we always could be, but never had the courage to be." "What is that?" "Ourselves." The wedding reception was filled with home-cooked food, accordion music, and stories about the transformation they had both gone through. "Your father is an example to everyone," said Mrs. Dorothy to Jennifer during the party. "An example of what?" "That it's never too late to start over." "And my mother?" "Your mother is an example that sometimes we need to leave to discover where we really want to be." David, who had requested a transfer to a workshop in Crystal Springs to be closer to his parents, gave an emotional speech. "Dad, a year ago, I thought I had lost you forever. Today I discovered I gained a father I didn't even know existed." "How so?" "You were always my father, but now you're also my friend, my partner, my inspiration. And you are my proof that it's worth fighting for relationships even when they seem lost." A year after the wedding, the Mobile Homes project had expanded to 15 cities. Harold and Catherine traveled constantly, training teams, supervising construction, implementing improvements. "You know what amazes me most about this whole story?" said Catherine in an interview for a national magazine. "What?" "My husband built a mobile home to find me, and in the end, he found himself." "And you? What did you find?" "I found that it's possible to be happy in ways we never even imagined existed." "How so?" "I thought happiness was having the freedom to do whatever I wanted. I discovered it's having a purpose to do what matters." "And what is your next plan?" Harold and Catherine looked at each other. "We don't have fixed plans," he said. "We learn to live one day at a time." "But we have directions," added Catherine. "We want to keep helping people, keep growing as people, keep discovering new things about ourselves and the world." "And keep traveling?" "Always," said Harold. "Our original home is still our mobile base. Whenever we need some time just for us, we hit the road with it." "Where are you going this time?" "We don't know. And that's exactly how we like it." Actually, Harold knew exactly where he wanted to go on the next trip. He had received a letter from a town in the interior of Louisiana, where a riverside community was facing problems with annual floods. "The mobile homes could be the perfect solution for our problem," the letter said. "We could move families to safe areas during flood season and return when the waters recede." It was exactly the kind of challenge that made Harold's eyes shine. Technical, social, and with a direct impact on the lives of real people. "What do you think?" he asked Catherine, showing her the letter. "I think our next adventure is planned, but it's far, and it will be difficult. Harold, has anything worth doing ever been easy?" "You're right. Besides, I'm sure we'll learn amazing things there." "Like what?" "Like how to be useful in places we've never been, how to solve problems we've never faced, how to keep growing when we think we've already grown enough." 2 weeks later, the original mobile home was on the road again, now loaded with materials and tools for the new mission. Harold drove with the confidence of someone who had made that journey hundreds of times. "Harold, can I ask you something I've always wanted to ask?" said Catherine, watching the landscape through the window. "Go ahead. When you started building the house, did you really not know what you were looking for?" "I really didn't know." "And now? Do you know what you found?" Harold thought about the question as he drove. He thought about the months of solitary construction, the journey with his children, the reunion with Catherine, the emergency housing project, the new life they had built together. "I've found that I don't need to search for anything. I just need to be open to whatever appears on the path." "And what has been appearing?" "Things I didn't even know existed. Opportunities to help, to grow, to surprise myself. And does that satisfy you?" "It satisfies me because it's real. It's not a fantasy or a dream. It's life truly happening." "And don't you miss the time when everything was predictable?" "Sometimes I do. But it's a nostalgic longing, not a desire to go back. Like how we miss childhood?" "Exactly. We remember it fondly, but we don't want to be children again." That night, parked in a small town on the way to Louisiana, Harold wrote a letter to Jennifer and David. "My dear children, I'm writing from the heartland on the way to a new adventure. I want you to know that everything that has happened in the last few years, the separation, the reconciliation, the house on wheels, the social project, all of it only made sense because you exist. You taught me that family isn't a fixed place. It's a daily choice to be present in each other's lives, even when we're geographically far apart. Jennifer, thank you for helping me leave Crystal Springs that first day. Without your courage, I never would have found mine. David, thank you for forgiving me and giving me the chance to be a better father. Your generosity taught me it's possible to rebuild relationships that seemed lost. Now we're heading to Louisiana to help a community I didn't even know existed. And I know you'll be proud of the work we'll do there, because it was the love I have for you that taught me the value of helping others. I don't know when we'll be back. I don't even know if we'll be back, but I know that wherever we are, you are with us. With endless love, Dad." "Beautiful letter," said Catherine, who had read over his shoulder. "Do you think they'll understand?" "I think they already do. You've created a kind of family relationship I've never seen before." "How so?" "Close, but not dependent. Loving, but not smothering. Each one free to live their own life, but always connected by what truly matters." "And what truly matters?" "The love that survives any distance." The arrival in Louisiana was a transformative experience. The riverside community lived at a completely different pace, in harmony with the cycles of nature, facing challenges Harold had never imagined. "Mr. Harold," said Raymond, the community leader who had written the letter, "we've lived here for 3 generations. Every year, between May and August, the water rises, and we have to abandon our homes and move to higher ground. It's a heck of a struggle." "And you'd like the houses to be able to move with you?" "Exactly. Instead of abandoning everything and starting from scratch every year, we could just move the houses." "That makes perfect sense." Harold spent a week studying the terrain, the flood patterns, the specific needs of the community. It was a completely new technical challenge. The houses would need to function both on solid ground and in flood-prone areas. "It's going to be more complicated than I imagined," he said to Catherine one night, as they planned the necessary adaptations. Complicated how? The houses will need a flotation system in addition to the wheel system, kind of amphibious. Can you do that? I don't know, but I'll try. And if you can't, then I'll try another way. The project took 6 months to develop and implement. Harold worked in partnership with local engineers, native carpenters, and river navigation experts. The result was a version of the houses on wheels that could also function as a floating house. "It's brilliant," said the engineer from the capital who came to evaluate the project. "I've never seen anything like it." The credit isn't just mine. It's from the whole community that collaborated. But the original idea is yours. The original idea was just not to stand still when things get tough. The rest was a consequence. The first flood season with the new houses was a complete success. Instead of abandoning their homes, the families simply transformed them into floating houses and continued their lives normally. "Mr. Harold, you've changed our lives," said Mrs. Martha, a 70-year-old woman who lived by the river. "How so, Mrs. Martha?" "Before, every year we lost everything, furniture, clothes, memories. Now we lose nothing, the house comes with us. And how does that feel? Free. For the first time in my life, I feel free from the worry of floods." Harold understood he had created much more than mobile homes. He had created freedom, the same freedom he himself had discovered when he built his first house on wheels. "Catherine, do you know what impresses me most about this whole story?" "What?" "I built the first house because I was feeling trapped, and now I'm building houses to free other people from that same feeling. Do you think that's a coincidence?" "No, I think it's purpose." "How so?" "I think my purpose in life is to teach people that they don't need to be trapped by circumstances, even when the circumstances are difficult, especially when they are." At the end of the first year in Louisiana, Harold and Catherine received an unexpected invitation. The federal government wanted to implement the amphibious house project in all flood-prone regions of the country. "It would be a national project," explained the ministry representative. "Hundreds of communities benefited." "That's a very big responsibility," said Harold, "but also a unique opportunity to amplify the impact of what you've created." Harold and Catherine talked at length about the proposal. Accepting would mean taking on an operation much larger than anything they had imagined. "What does your heart say?" asked Catherine. "My heart says I can't say no to people who need help just because the project is too big." "And your head?" "My head says we're going to need many more people, much more organization, much more planning. Do you think we can do it?" "I don't know, but I think we should try." "Why?" "Because 3 years ago I didn't know I was capable of building a house on wheels. If I can surprise myself once, I can surprise myself again." The decision to accept the national project marks the beginning of a new phase in Harold and Catherine's lives. They returned to Crystal Springs to establish an administrative headquarters, but kept their house on wheels as a mobile office. "Dad, how are you feeling with all this responsibility?" asked Jennifer during a visit. "Scared and excited at the same time." "More scared or more excited?" "It depends on the day, but on average more excited." "Why?" "Because I finally understood what my mission in life is." "What is it?" "To prove to people that they are more capable than they imagine." "How are you going to do that?" "By showing that if a 50-year-old lumberjack can build houses on wheels and change the lives of hundreds of families, anyone can do amazing things with their life." The national project took 2 years to be fully implemented. In the end, more than 200 communities across the country had been benefited with amphibious houses. "Harold," said Catherine one morning, reading a report on the project's impact, "do you know how many people were directly benefited by your work?" "No." "How many?" "Almost 2,000 families. That's about 8,000 people." 8,000 people. 8,000 people who no longer need to abandon their homes during floods. 8,000 people who have more security, more dignity, more freedom. Harold fell silent, processing the magnitude of what they had achieved. "And it all started because you couldn't stand still in a small town after I left." It's strange to think about that, isn't it? It's not strange, it's magical. How so? "Harold, you transformed your personal pain into a solution for thousands of people's problems. If that isn't magic, I don't know what is." On a Sunday morning, Exactly 3 years after starting to build the first house on wheels, Harold woke up early and went to sit on the porch. The sun was rising over Crystal Springs, and everything seemed exactly the same as 3 years before. But he knew nothing was the same. The town had grown with the arrival of volunteers and technicians involved in the project. His house had become the center of an operation that benefited people across the country. His family had reconciled and strengthened in ways he never imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" asked Catherine, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. "I'm thinking that 3 years ago I was desperate because my life had fallen apart. And now? Now I'm grateful that it fell apart." "How so?" "If you hadn't left, if I hadn't fought with David, if I hadn't been alone and lost, I never would have built the house. And if you hadn't built the house, I'd still be the same limited, fearful man, trapped by my own constraints. And now what are you? Now I'm someone who isn't afraid of not knowing what comes next." "And what do you think comes next?" Harold looked at the original house on wheels, parked in the backyard like a permanent reminder of where it all began. "I don't know, but I'm eager to find out." Catherine laughed. "You really have changed." "We both changed, we all changed. For the better? For more true. And that, in the end, is the only thing that really matters." That afternoon, they received a visit from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell the full story of the House on Wheels project. "Mr. Harold, what was the most difficult moment of this entire journey?" he asked. Harold thought for a long moment. "The most difficult moment was making the decision to build the first house." "Why?" "Because I didn't know if I would be capable, and I was afraid of what people would think." "And what was the most rewarding moment?" "It was also making the decision to build the first house." "How can it be both?" "Because the best moments in life are always also the scariest." "And what advice would you give to people going through difficult times?" "That they don't stand still. That they do something, even if it seems crazy. That they have the courage to change when things aren't working. Even without knowing the outcome. Especially without knowing the outcome, because that's precisely where the magic happens." "What magic?" "The magic of transformation. You become a person you didn't even know you could be." The documentary aired on national television and resonated for weeks. The story of the lumberjack who built a house on wheels to find himself and ended up helping thousands of people inspired news reports, articles, and even some books. "Dad, you've become a national icon," joked David. "An icon of what?" "Of overcoming, of creativity, of not giving up when everything seems lost." "I didn't do anything special." "Of course you did. You proved that an ordinary person can do extraordinary things. Anyone can do that. But not everyone does. That's the difference." In truth, Harold was starting to grow tired of all that attention. He preferred being on the road, visiting communities, working with his hands, solving practical problems. "Catherine, what if we disappeared for a while?" "How so?" "What if we took our house and traveled without a destination like we used to? And the national project, it's already running on its own. We have an excellent team, well-established systems. They don't need us day to day anymore. And where would we go? Wherever the road takes us. For how long? As long as it takes for us to remember who we are when nobody is watching." The decision was made in a week. They organized everything so the project could continue without them, took the original house on wheels, and disappeared down the road without telling anyone where they were going. "Where are we going this time?" asked Catherine as they left Crystal Springs. "South. I've always wanted to see the mountains of Montana." "And after the South?" "After the South, we'll see." "Harold, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "These last few years have been the most intense of my life, but they've also been the best." "Why?" "Because I finally discovered who I am when I'm being useful." "And who are you?" "Someone who likes to organize things that help other people, someone who likes to travel with purpose, someone who likes to live adventures beside the person they love." "And me? Who am I?" "You are someone who turns problems into solutions, someone who isn't afraid to start from scratch when necessary, someone who teaches other people to be brave without even realizing it. And together? Together, we're unstoppable." The trip to the south lasted 3 months. They visited communities, met people, helped with small projects, but mostly enjoyed the freedom of having no fixed schedule. "You know what I miss the most when we're caught up in the project rush?" said Catherine one morning, sitting on the porch of the house overlooking a mountain landscape. "What?" "Time to talk, really talk, about important things." "And what do you want to talk about?" "About us, about how far we've come, about how we got here." "And what do you conclude?" "That we've been very lucky." "Lucky?" "Harold, if you think about it, everything could have gone wrong. The house might not have worked. The kids might not have supported us. I might not have come back. The project could have been a failure. But none of that happened. Exactly why? Harold thought about the question while looking at the mountains. "I think it's because we were doing it for the right reasons." "What reasons?" "Love, a desire to fix broken things, a wish to help." "And you think that makes a difference?" "I think it makes all the difference in the world." "Why?" "Because when you do things for the right reasons, the universe conspires to help you." "Do you really believe that?" "I do. Not in a mystical way, but in a practical way." "How so?" "When you're doing something that truly matters, people want to help. Solutions appear, doors open. And when you're doing it for the wrong reasons, then you find resistance everywhere. That night, for the first time in months, they talked about the future. "Harold, what do you want to do in the next few years?" "Honestly, I want to keep going exactly as we are." "How so?" "I want to keep helping people when the opportunity arises. I want to keep traveling when we feel like it. I want to keep discovering new things about myself and about you." "And you don't want anything more stable?" "This is stable. It's stable because it's based on what really matters to us. And if we get too old to travel, then we'll find other ways to help. But we won't stop growing." "Promise?" "I promise I'll try not to stop growing." "And do you promise the same?" "I promise." "Then it's a deal." On the way back home, they stopped in a small town where a 20-year-old boy had built an electric car from recycled materials. "It's amazing," said Harold, looking at the vehicle. "How did you get this idea?" "I saw a report about your house on wheels on television," the boy replied. "I thought, if he can build a house that moves, I can build a car that doesn't pollute." "And did it work?" "It worked. And now other young people in the region are doing similar things." Harold looked at Catherine with a smile. "Do you know what that means? That your story is inspiring other people. That our story is inspiring other people. And does that make you happy?" "It makes me feel like it was all worth it." "What was?" "Everything. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, the work. It was all worth it." On the day of their return to Crystal Springs, they were welcomed by family and the entire project team. There were gifts, speeches, and lots of news to catch up on. "Dad, something amazing happened while you were traveling," said Jennifer. "What was it?" "The project was selected to represent the United States at an international conference on housing solutions." "Where?" "In France. They want you to present the work to experts from all over the world." Harold looked at Catherine. "What do you think?" "I think our adventure is still just beginning." "France. Harold, do you remember when you told me you wanted to give me the adventure I always wanted?" "I remember." "Well, I think you succeeded." "How so?" "You gave me the greatest adventure of all, the adventure of discovering what we're capable of when we're together." "And what did we discover?" "That there are no limits to what we can do when we do it with love." The trip to France happened 6 months later. Harold presented the project to an audience of 300 experts from 40 countries. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in Portuguese with simultaneous translation, "I am not a housing expert. I am just a man who built a house on wheels because I couldn't stay still." The audience laughed. "But I learned that the best projects aren't born from experts. They are born from ordinary people who refuse to accept problems as permanent." Applause. "The project you are about to learn about is not mine. It belongs to hundreds of families who faced floods every year and refused to accept that this was normal." More applause. "Because life shouldn't be about surviving problems. It should be about turning problems into opportunities for growth. The presentation was an absolute success. Several countries expressed interest in adapting the project for their local realities. "Monsieur Harold," said a French engineer after the presentation, "your work is revolutionary." "Revolutionary?" "Yes, you created a new paradigm for emergency housing, but more than that, you showed that innovation comes from love, not from technology." "Thank you," replied Harold, still not very comfortable with English. "When will you publish a book about your method?" "Book?" "Yes. The world needs to learn your approach." That night, in the hotel in Paris, Harold talked with Catherine about the book suggestion. "Do you think I should write a book?" "I think you should do what your heart tells you." "My heart says I don't know how to write books." "And what else does your heart say?" "That if I can help more people by telling our story, I should try." "Then it's decided." "How so?" "We're going to write a book. Together." "Together?" "Of course, half the story is mine too." The book took a year to write. They worked in the mornings, traveled in the afternoons, and revised the text at night. It was a process of rediscovering their own journey through writing. "Catherine, have you noticed something?" "What?" "By writing our story, I'm understanding things I didn't understand when we lived them." "Like what?" "Like how every step was necessary to get where we are. How every difficulty served to prepare us for the next challenge." "Do you think it was all planned?" "I don't think it was planned by anyone, but I think it made sense for it to happen the way it did." "Why?" "Because when you're doing what you're meant to do, things fall into place." The book was published simultaneously in Portuguese, English, and French. The title, The House on Wheels, How to Turn Crisis into Opportunity. "Dad, did you know your book has sold over 100,000 copies?" said David, showing a news article. 100,000? And it's being translated into 10 other languages. My God. Dad, do you have any idea of the reach of what you've done? Harold looked out the window of the house, watching the normal movement of the small town. David, do you know what's the strangest part of all this? What? I still feel like the same guy who was building the house in the backyard 5 years ago. But you're not the same. How so? You've become a reference for millions of people. You've become a symbol that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to turn pain into purpose. And that hasn't changed me inside. How not? Inside, I'm still just a guy who loves his family, who likes to solve problems with his hands and who can't stand still when he sees someone needing help. And you think that's little? I think that's everything. 5 years after the book's publication, Harold and Catherine had become recognized international speakers. They traveled the world telling their story and helping communities implement similar projects. Harold, said Catherine one morning as they packed their bags for another trip, have you ever stopped to count how many countries we've visited? No. How many? 23. 23 countries. Who would have thought? And in how many have we implemented projects? 7 so far. And how many families have been helped worldwide? I lost count. It must be in the thousands. And it all started because you couldn't accept that I had left. No. It all started because I couldn't accept staying still when my life fell apart. And what's the difference? The difference is that the problem wasn't you leaving. It was me not knowing how to react when things changed. And now you know? Now, I know that the only permanent thing in life is change, and that we can choose whether to react to changes or use the changes to grow. And which do you choose? Always grow, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. That afternoon, they received a phone call that surprised them. It was from an American university that wanted to create a chair in applied social innovation in honor of their work. Professor Harold, said the dean, would you consider coming to teach at our university? Harold looked at Catherine, who was following the conversation. I appreciate the honor, he replied, but I'm not an academic. That's exactly why we want you. You represent a different kind of knowledge. The knowledge that comes from practice, from real-life experience. Let me think about it. Of course, but please know that this would be an opportunity to impact thousands of students who will go on to create social innovations of their own. After hanging up the phone, Harold and Catherine talked about the proposal. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's a completely new way of helping people." "How so?" "Instead of helping directly, you would be teaching other people how to help, multiplying the impact." "Exactly. But I've never been a teacher." "You've been a teacher for years, just not in a traditional classroom." "How so?" "Harold, how many people have you taught to build houses on wheels? How many teams have you trained? How many volunteers have you guided?" "Hundreds." "So you're already a teacher. You just hadn't realized it. The decision to accept the proposal was made after many conversations with the family." "Dad, are you sure you want to move to the United States?" asked Jennifer. "Not forever. The idea is to spend a few months a year there, and the rest of the time continue traveling and working on projects." "And are you going to take the house on wheels?" "Of course," replied Catherine. "She'll be our home anywhere in the world." "And do you think it will work?" "Jen," said Harold, 10 years ago I thought nothing in my life would ever work. I've learned you never know until you try. And if it doesn't work out, then we try something else." "Is it always like that?" "It's always like that." The move to the American university was another transformative experience. Harold discovered he loved working with young people, that his practical way of approaching social problems inspired a new generation of innovators. "Professor Harold," said a student after a class, "how do you know when an idea is worth pursuing?" "You don't know," he replied. "You try and find out." "But what if you fail?" "Then you learn something valuable and try again." "But what if you keep failing?" "Then you keep learning until you succeed." "How do you stay motivated?" Harold thought about the question for a moment. "You remember why you started. If your reason is good enough, motivation takes care of itself." "What was your reason?" "I wanted to stop feeling powerless. I wanted to believe that I could make a difference." "And do you?" "Make a difference." "I try to. Every day." "Is that enough?" "Trying is everything. Results are a bonus." On weekends, Harold and Catherine explored the United States with the house on wheels, visiting communities, learning about social projects, always discovering new things. "Catherine, have you noticed something?" "What?" 15 years ago, when you said you wanted to see the world, I thought you were being irresponsible. And now? Now I understand you were being wise." "How so?" "You knew we needed to leave our comfort zone to discover what we were capable of." "I didn't know, I just felt it. And your feelings were right. And yours?" "Mine were wrong. I thought security came from controlling the variables. Actually, it comes from trusting in our ability to handle whatever comes." "And do you trust now?" "I do, in both of us, in our ability to adapt, to grow, to find solutions. Even when we don't know what lies ahead. Especially when we don't know." At the end of his first year as a visiting professor, Harold was invited to give a TED Talk, the theme, "How to Build a Life That Moves." "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to an audience of 1,000 people, 15 years ago I was a man stuck in place, literally and figuratively." Laughter from the audience. "I had the same job for 30 years, lived in the same town my entire life, followed the same routines every single day. And then, one day, my wife left me. My son stopped speaking to me. My life fell apart." Attentive silence. "I had two choices. I could stay stuck in self-pity, or I could build something that would allow me to move toward solutions. I chose to build." Applause. "I built a house on wheels." House. "Not because I knew it would work, but because I knew staying still wasn't working." More applause. "And what I learned is that movement is not about physical location. It's about psychological flexibility. It's about being willing to change when change is needed." Today, that house on wheels has become thousands of mobile homes, helping families around the world. But more importantly, it has become a symbol of something we all need: the courage to move towards solutions instead of staying stuck in problems. Standing ovation. So my message to you is simple. If your life isn't working, don't just sit there. Build something. Try something. Move towards something better. You might surprise yourself with what you're capable of building. The talk was seen by millions of people and became one of the most shared in TED history. "Dad," said David over the phone after watching the talk, "you know you've become a worldwide phenomenon, right? How so?" "Your phrase, 'don't just sit there, build something,' has become a hashtag on social media. People from all over the world are posting photos of projects they're building inspired by your story." "What kind of projects?" "Everything. Alternative homes, social enterprises, NGOs, inventions, art, music. People who were stuck and decided to take action." "Is that good?" "Dad, it's incredible. You've become a force for global change." "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did. You proved that an ordinary person can have an extraordinary impact. Anyone can do that. But not everyone does, that's the difference. 10 years after building the first house on wheels, Harold and Catherine decided to take a special trip. They would revisit all the places they had been, all the communities they had helped, all the people they had met. "It's a journey of gratitude," Catherine explained to their children. "What do you mean?" "We want to personally thank everyone who made this story possible." "And how long will it take?" "As long as it needs to." The trip lasted 2 years. They visited every town, every project, every family that had been impacted by their work. It was an experience of truly grasping the reach of a decision that had begun out of desperation. "Mr. Harold," shouted Mrs. Martha, the lady from Louisiana, when she saw them arriving. "How I've missed you. Mrs. Martha, how are you?" "Great. And my amphibious house is working perfectly. It's been through 5 floods, and it's still standing strong." "And your family?" "Growing. I have 2 new grandchildren who were born in the house you helped build." "Born in the house?" "Yes, they were. During last year's flood. The midwife said she'd never delivered a baby in a floating house before." Harold and Catherine laughed. "Mrs. Martha, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you remember what life was like before the amphibious houses?" "I do. It was a life of constant loss. Every year we lost something. Furniture, clothes, documents, memories. And now? Now it's a life of constant gains. We gained freedom, we gained security, we gained dignity. And what else? We gained hope. Hope that problems have solutions, even when they seem impossible. In every place they visited, they heard similar stories. People who had regained hope, families who had found stability, communities that had grown stronger. Catherine, do you realize what we've done? We didn't do anything alone, Harold. We were just the first push. The rest was done by hundreds of people who believed in the idea. But the push was important. It was. But no more important than the courage of all the people who embraced the idea and made it grow. And what does that teach us? That real change happens when one person has a good idea and other people have the courage to support it. And how do we know when an idea is good, when it solves real problems for real people? And how do we find those ideas? By living authentically, by paying attention to the difficulties around us, by refusing to accept that problems are normal. At the end of the gratitude journey, they returned to Crystal Springs. The town had completely changed. It was now a reference center for housing solutions, receiving visitors from all over the world. "Dad, there's a surprise waiting for you," said Jennifer when they arrived. "What surprise?" The city council decided to create a museum about the history of the houses on wheels, and they want the original house to be the main exhibit. Harold looked at the house he had built so many years ago. It was a little more worn, with some marks from the road, but still solid and functional. A museum, to inspire other people who are going through hard times, to show that it's always possible to start over. "And what do you all think?" "We think it's a perfect way to honor what you built," said David. "Not what I built, what we built. All together." "That's true. What we built together." Harold looked at Catherine. "What do you think? Are you ready to retire our house?" "I am, but only if we build a new one. A new house on wheels." "Why not? We still have places to see, people to help, adventures to live, even after everything we've already done. Especially after everything we've already done. Now we know what we're capable of." "And what are we capable of?" "Anything we decide to try." The museum's inauguration happened on a sunny Saturday. Hundreds of people came from all parts of the country to participate in the ceremony. The original house on wheels was positioned in the center of the main hall, surrounded by photos, testimonials, and replicas of all the versions that had been created over the years. "Ladies and gentlemen," said the mayor during the ceremony, "this house represents much more than a technical solution to housing problems. It represents proof that a determined person can change the world." Applause. Harold Mitchell was not an engineer, not an architect, not a businessman. He was simply a man who refused to accept that his life was over when things got tough. More applause. And by refusing to give up, he not only rebuilt his own life, he taught us that we are all capable of rebuilding our lives when necessary. Standing ovation. When it was Harold's turn to speak, he took the stage with Catherine by his side. "Friends," he said, looking at the audience, 15 years ago I was a lost man, scared, not knowing what to do when my life fell apart. Today I am a grateful man, grateful for having learned that collapses are sometimes necessary so we can build something better in their place. This house," he said, pointing to the structure, "was my way of saying no to despair and yes to possibility. And what I learned is that we all have that choice every single day. We can say yes to despair or yes to possibility. The difference is that possibility requires action. Possibility requires courage. Possibility requires movement. So my message to you is, if your life isn't working, don't stand still waiting for it to fix itself. Build something, try something, move towards some solution. Because you are far more capable than you imagine. And the world needs what only you can build." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and from where you are watching us. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Harold made the right decisions during his journey? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.